This is not getting discussed on the mainstream media. Not only are they wrong legally, but the fact that they would do this is outrageous. This is an overreaction and really nonsense. How would you react if this was your son or your daughter? It's the offense of knowing the truth. It's the offense of having an alternate worldview. Saying God bless you to someone is not a violation of the law.
Welcome to Jay Sekulow Live, folks. President Obama's White House, one of his spokespeople says, listen, hey, we made these 4 appointments. We're going to keep going if Republicans keep acting this way. Interesting enough, this is a strategy that Democrats, again, supported and actually created in the last 2 years of the Bush administration. It's called pro forma. It means there's not a recess. President Obama really going against over 100 years of precedent, now saying, I don't care if it's pro forma. I'm going to say it's a recess. His own legal advisors have said it's not. And, Dad, this is becoming every single day, more and more people are starting to really fully comprehend how unprecedented this power grab by President Obama is.
This is a constitutional crisis of real significance. We've got major editorials, including the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, all over the country. One stating this: the new appointees can pocket their government paychecks, but all their official acts will be void as a matter of law and will likely be struck down by the courts in legal challenges that are certain to come. David Rifkin states that these 3 appointments are all unconstitutional. Michael McConnell, former federal judge, also former Department of Justice official, states exactly the same thing. He says these are unconstitutional. This is not in recess. It's a violation of the law. How about this, folks? Ted Kennedy filed a lawsuit actually, opposing the appointment of William Pryor to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. Why? Because he said there was not a full enough recess. Now, in that case, the recess was 10 days. In this case, there is no recess at all. I'm glad our television audience are with us today because, folks, frankly, this is a constitutional crisis. We will be posting some of this video online this afternoon. By the way, Eric Holder receiving another letter, this time from Senators Hatch, Senators Grassley, Cornyn, Tom Coburn, on and on it goes, Jeff Sessions, all good friends of ours, saying over 90 years of precedent has been violated by President Obama's unconstitutional disregard of the recess appointment clause, and that's what he's done here. Jordan, this is starting to it's growing as we speak.
It is growing, and folks, it's one of those things happening again while politics is so much in the focus. Let me make it very clear, and I've asked people this before and continue to ask the question again today. Even if you're a supporter of President Obama, do you want the next president, if it's not President Obama, a Republican president, to have this kind of power? Because that's what you're setting up when you change precedent and when you allow this kind of presidential power grab. This should not be, Dad, just Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee asking the Department of Justice and Eric Holder this question. It should be all members of Congress because it takes away their constitutional power regardless of what party they are, and that's why folks have got to take a stand.
Folks, my BlackBerry is on fire here. People are emailing us from all over the country. We're taking direct action. We're petitioning the White House to undo what they've done, which is like unconstitutional act. We need you to join with us. Here's the number. Everybody go to your phones. Thousands of you have done it, over 35,000. 877-989-2255. If you want to stand up for the Constitution, tell the president you don't have the authority to violate it. 1-877-989-2255 to have your voice heard, or ACLJ.org.
And I refuse to take no for an answer.
It's an unbelievable power grab. Ignoring Congress, President Obama has just made political appointments to key government posts, brushing aside the separation of powers and acting in a manner that can only be described as unconstitutional. Of course, the Constitution permits all presidents to make appointments when the Senate is in recess. But that's not the case here. There's been no recess, and yet President Obama has taken this unprecedented and disturbing action. Stand with the American Center for Law and Justice now. Tell President Obama he must retract these unconstitutional appointments and urge him to abide by the framework of our nation, the U.S. Constitution. Add your name to our petition right now. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online aclj.org.
Hey, welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. I thought it would be good to reacquaint everyone with this topic. What we're talking about is a conflict where the president has made very controversial recess appointments, except the Congress is not in recess. What a recess appointment allows is for an appointment to be made when Congress is out on a temporary basis. But Congress has to actually be in recess. That's not the case here. I was on Fox News when this first broke. Let's take a look.
Well, as we've been telling you, President Obama is today visiting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That's the new agency that has been created to protect us from financial agencies and the wrath that we saw in 2008. And then he appointed, the president did, Richard Cordray as the chief of that agency. And that appointment has sparked a huge controversy this week. And a newly filed lawsuit today is claiming that President Obama violated the Constitution by not seeking congressional approval for that appointment. Cordray speaking here about his new post.
I tend to assume that people are always trying to do what they think is right. We may just disagree at times on what that is. So I'm going to work forward and build that relationship with Congress.
So Jay Sekulow is the chief counsel of the American Center for Law and Justice. Jay, welcome. Always good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Martha.
So tell me about this lawsuit that you filed against the administration.
Well, we haven't filed it yet. We're looking at all the options, but we're not going to be the only one, by the way. It looks like there's going to be 3 or 4, and here's what it is. There's 2 provisions of the Constitution at play. Article 1, which is the congressional authority, which sets their own recess schedule. Article 2, which is the presidential authority, and the Congress isn't in recess. In fact, when they're arguing, and what you've got is a situation where presidents can make recess appointments when the Congress is in recess.
Right.
But that's not the case here. And what's making it even, I think, Martha, really more complicated is the nominees for the National Labor Relations Board were just made at the towards the end of December, so they haven't even had time for hearings. This is a usurpation of congressional authority and a power grab by the administration that, frankly, I don't think we've seen in our constitutional history. Yep. This was a very brazen and bold move by the president.
It's really interesting, Jay, because the more you dig into this, the more it appears that there is an issue here. The Senate was sort of in pro forma session, which basically means, somebody's sort of putting their foot inside the door and saying, we're here, technically we're here, while they're not doing any business. And this whole way of doing that was used a lot during the Bush administration, and apparently President Obama was in favor of it then.
Right. In fact, President Obama was one of the architects in 2006 of putting in this pro forma plan so that Congress could not get into a recess situation. Let me take it a step further, by the way. The Democrats keep talking about, oh, this is just pro forma. You know that tax payroll extension that they all debated last month? That was done during a pro forma session. So this argument they have that nothing is actually happening is A, false, and B, this is the Democrats' own technique. It is their own scheme. It is their own method. And they set the precedent for this. So to now say it's really unjust when they're the ones that implement it, I'm sorry, that's not going to fly legally, and it's not going to fly with the American people.
Yeah, so where do you think it goes from here? I mean, do you think that there'll be the focus on this and the attention paid to it, and will it be followed through on in a way that could perhaps overturn these appointments?
I think there's a realistic chance that, number one, I think you're going to see litigation, so that'll be up to the courts to decide, number one. Number two, I think the president has just unintentionally created a political issue, a huge political issue, because the president of the United States is the president of the United States. He's the chief executive officer. He's not the king. He's not the sovereign. He doesn't get to make up the rules on his own. He has to play by our rule book, and our rule book is the United States Constitution. That has been shredded here. There are specific provisions of the Constitution at play. There's a clash now between the executive and the legislative branch of government, and that is going to be resolved in the courts. But, Martha, at the end of the day, the president has set up his own constitutional crisis. He may have had political reasons for doing it, but I think he's going to pay the consequences.
And essentially what's behind some of the dissatisfaction with the creation of this agency is that people, feel that it's going to be anti-business. And I would just point out, we looked this up this morning. This is a brand new government agency. They employ 700 people already. At this agency,
and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is very much opposed to this, as is a lot of business interests. But frankly, I think it's not going to just be the chamber; it's going to be the American people realizing what's happened to the Constitution here.
We will see. Jay, thank you so much. Always good to hear from you.
We brought this to your attention, to our radio audience, last week, and boy, has it picked up interest. And that is, the president's made 3 very controversial appointments without advice and consent of the United States Senate. That's required in the Constitution. Now, advice and consent is very straightforward. It's set forth in Article 2. Here's the problem. The president, and you can find this, by the way, on pages 23 and 24 of our Foundations of Freedom booklet, there is a provision in the Constitution that also allows for recess appointments for the president to make them when Congress is in recess, but Congress has to actually be in recess. Here, there has been no recess. In fact, the Department of Justice has maintained that a recess has to be at least 3 days in length. Here, there's been no recess whatsoever. This was something that was put in by the Democrats, by the way, during the Bush administration to stop recess appointments, and President Bush stopped doing it. We now got a letter to the United States Senate, since we brought this to the attention of the American people, that has gone to Eric Holder asking for an explanation. A brief has surfaced from Senator Kennedy back in 2004 when he opposed the nomination of Judge Bill Pryor. We were on the other side of that case. Here's the problem. The president, in our view, has, and according to a lot of legal scholars as well, is disregarding the Constitution. There's a lot more at stake than this and than just the National Labor Relations Board or the Consumer Protection Agency. This is a constitutional showdown that is significant. What we're doing is petitioning the White House right now to retract, and we're asking the House and the Senate, specifically the Senate, to stand firm here. Why is it important for you to participate? It's important for you to participate because the reality is the Constitution is being shredded as we speak. And I want to make sure that you, the American people, we the people, are heard in this. So we've heard from over 35,000 of you in just a few days, basically Friday and over the weekend. We need to hear from many more. I'd like to get this up to 100,000 when we send these petitions in. But you need to take a stand here. Here's the number, 877-989-2255. You're signing on to this petition telling the president it's our Constitution. You don't get to disregard it as you've done here. 1-877-989-2255 or ACLJ.org. Jordan, we're getting a lot of phone calls. Let's go right to the phones because the calls are pouring in.
Let's go to Patrick in Indiana on line 3. Patrick, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi, thank you. This recess appointment, when there is no recess, and Obama's been doing a lot of other things that are unconstitutional, the only way to enforce the Constitution is for the Congress to get busy and do their job. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 says the Congress has the power to call up the National Guard to execute the laws of the Union.
Yeah, but you're not going to have the Congress. This is what you've got here is a legal showdown. This is not going to reach the level of calling up the National Guard or declaring a civil strife within the country. This is a constitutional issue which pits Article 2 issues against Article 1, and that's the power of the presidency outlined in Article 2. Article 1 is the Congress. Article 3 is the courts. That's probably where this is going to go. And I do think it's very clear here that, and one of the things that's pointed out in these editorials is that it's not up to the president to decide whether the Senate is in recess or not. It's not the president's decision whether they're working hard or not. And he's taken that upon himself. He keeps making that statement. You know, they're not going to do their job, so I'm just going to do it. Well, you don't get to do it illegally or unconstitutionally, which is what's happened right here. And that's really been the problem of what we're finding ourselves dealing with, is that the president has taken this on his own initiative. He doesn't have the authority to do that. This is a pitting of the Constitution, and the American people really are the ones that are suffering in the process.
And, folks, that's why you have to take a stand here. You change precedent like this. You change presidential power like this, and you may say, I'm okay with it this time because I think this Congress isn't doing enough. You know, elections matter. And if you don't like how this Congress is operating, you got a chance to vote every 2 years to really change that balance of power, that structure. And what happened in 2010 is that the American people said we want to slow the Obama agenda. So they elected a Republican majority of the House of Representatives, knowing that that means it would be much more difficult for President Obama, who could barely pass his most controversial legislation through a Democrat majority House of Representatives. Remember, Obamacare passed by 1 vote, but there were plenty more Democrats that voted against it. So the American people voted for that. They may be frustrated, but, Dad, that doesn't mean the president gets to go in and change congressional rules. And that's why people on both sides of the aisle should be outraged, should not have to be a partisan issue.
I want to encourage people to go to their phones right now and join on to this petition. Let's stand firm here. Let's stand for the Constitution. Tell the president he doesn't get to shred the Constitution. The number to do that's 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255. By the way, you can also go to ACLJ.org and sign on that way. But again, 877-989-2255. We need direct action. Interesting, in the letter to the Senate, in one of the paragraphs, Senators Grassley and Hatch and others have stated that in 2010, the Deputy Solicitor General of the United States argued before the Supreme Court that recess has to be longer than 3 days for the president to use the recess appointment power. They then asked the question, does the department continue to support this position? Well, evidently not, although it looks like the Department of Justice was never given a chance to weigh in on this. And interestingly here, folks, I think I got to point this out. Some of these appointments were not, the nominations weren't until the end of December. When we're filming this, we're in the early part of January for our radio audience, and television you'll be seeing it in the next couple of weeks. So these were recent appointments. You haven't even had a chance for hearings on these. So this isn't about filibuster. This is about the president shredding the Constitution. Let's go right back to the phones.
Let's go to Al calling from Colorado on line 1. Al, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hi, Al.
Hi. I'm just wondering about the other part of this. I understand that he's shredding the Constitution, and that doesn't shock me. But what about these people that he's putting? What's his agenda? These people that he's putting into these positions?
Well, these are people that are left of center. But, the president can make – look, under the Constitution, the president gets to make nomination. He can nominate. He can nominate the most radical people for the positions. Then it's up to the Senate with advice and consent of whether those people will be confirmed or not. For instance, one of the people that have been confirmed for the National Labor Relations Board – was arguing that illegal immigrants were entitled to back pay. It was overturned by the Supreme Court, by the way. The Supreme Court didn't buy that. But the president, under the Constitution, has the authority to nominate and appoint. But it's with the advice and consent of the Senate. Here, what the president is doing is basically taking the position, I don't care what the United States Senate says. I'm going to do what I want to do. In fact, he's being very clear about it. Let's go ahead and play that if we have it.
When Congress refuses to act, and as a result hurts our economy and puts our people at risk, then I have an obligation as president to do what I can without them.
All right, folks, we're going to be taking a break, and we'll be taking more of your calls. But, Jordan, this is the time to get people to act.
Yeah, folks, we need you to take a stand here, and I really want you to put politics aside and just understand, regardless of whether you love President Obama or you're going to be voting against him in November, you need to understand that this would be a change in presidential power, a way to circumvent Congress, to put the most radical people in positions when there isn't a recess, to go and make a new constitutional power for the president. It's rewriting the Constitution, and we have to take a stand. Are you going to do so today? Call right now, 877-989-2255. That's 877-989-2255. It's one of those issues, too, get your friends and family educated on. I understand it's complicated. You see the numbers, you say, oh, President Bush made recess appointments. Why can't President Obama? That's not the discussion. No one would be talking about it if it was. Call now, 877-989-2255. Protect your Constitution.
And I refuse to take no for an answer.
It's an unbelievable power grab. Ignoring Congress, President Obama has just made political appointments to key government posts, brushing aside the separation of powers and acting in a manner that can only be described as unconstitutional. Of course, the Constitution permits all presidents to make appointments when the Senate is in recess. But that's not the case here. There's been no recess, and yet President Obama has taken this unprecedented and disturbing action. Stand with the American Center for Law and Justice now. Tell President Obama he must retract these unconstitutional appointments and urge him to abide by the framework of our nation, the U.S. Constitution. Add your name to our petition right now. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online ACLJ.org.
Hey, welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. I want to encourage you to go to your phones and join with us. We're very concerned about what President Obama is doing. We're not the only ones that are concerned now. We've got a letter from Senators Grassley, Senators Cornyn, Senators Hatch, Senator Sessions, Senator Coburn, and others that are outraged as well. This is from the Senate Committee on the Judiciary, asking the Attorney General under what circumstances could these possibly be considered recess appointments. And we know, by the way, that the Office of Legal Counsel didn't give any advice on this. So this is the time for you to react, for you to have your voice heard. We encourage you to add your name to this petition, calling on the President to retract these appointments and to abide by the Constitution. It's that simple. 877-989-2255 is the number. That's 1-877-989-2255 or ACLJ.org. Let's go right back to the phones.
William's calling from Michigan on line 2. William, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hi, William.
Yes, how are you doing today?
Good.
think that, quite frankly, I think that the Constitution needs to be rewritten anyway, because the framework of the Constitution supported segregation for so long.
Well, they amended the Constitution to do away with that, and you can change the Constitution, but that's through the amendment process. The president can't do that on his own initiative. You don't agree with that? You don't think the president has the authority, William, to just do that on his own?
Well, I think any president should have the option of making appointments when Congress chooses, for whatever reason, not to fly back in and vote on this. I mean,
well, hold it. Well, he does. If they're in recess, he can. That's what the Constitution says. But let me ask you this: if there was a President Romney or a President Santorum or a President Hatch, and they wanted to appoint a Supreme Court justice during while the Congress was not in recess, but during one of these 3-day things, are you okay with that?
Well,
you're all right with that?
Well, they have to notify.
No, they notify, but they're not in session. They don't have to notify. They just
President
do it.
Obama didn't notify anybody. He just walked up at a political rally, William,
and did it.
And announced it because he said, you know what, take me to court, fine. And this is what I just want to ask everybody, Dad and William. I'm not trying to be mean. I know people get frustrated with Congress and power, but what I've always asked, and why I think if you're even an Obama supporter, you have to understand here is if he gets away with it, if he's allowed to do it, William, the next president can do it whenever he or she wants, whenever they want, regardless if you like it or not, regardless of the makeup of Congress, which you elect as well. And I just want to hear from those who think what Obama did is okay here. Are you going to be okay with it if it's a really conservative president and you don't like the people that they're appointing and you don't like the fact they're circumventing Congress? Are you going to say, well, I supported President Obama, so I'll support this one too?
If my Congress people choose not to be there and represent me,
hold it. They're not in. If they're in a recess, the president can make an appointment. William, they're not in recess though. So if they're not in recess, do you think the Constitution needs to be changed? There's a process to do that. It's called the amendment process. You don't believe that a president can amend the Constitution by himself, do you?
How can it be done?
Now, I'm asking you a question. Do you think that the President of the United States, you think President Obama has the authority to modify the Constitution himself without going through the amendment process?
If I think him or any other president?
I said, do you think that President Obama has, I'm going to ask it for the last time, you give me a yes or no answer. Do you think President Obama has the authority to amend the Constitution without going through the process?
I'm trying to put it on President.
See, you don't want to answer the question. Because if it's good for President Obama, it'd be good for the next President of the United States as well. And that's just not the way it works. Nobody should have that kind of authority, period. Jordan, let's take another call.
Yeah, William should read Article 5, the amendments process of the U.S. Constitution, and that's how you can go about making a constitutional. Let's go to Ray calling in Kentucky on line 5. Ray, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hi, Ray.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
I think a lot of the problem is that people, they don't understand what's going on there because of the propaganda machine that the media has become. I think that's what it has.
Well, there's no doubt that the media has been on this issue. And look, this is a complicated issue. I'm not going to pretend for a moment that folks, that what we're talking about here is not complicated constitutional analysis. But what's not complicated is the White House is taking action and the Congress is not in recess. That's where it's not complicated. But the media, of course, is giving some passes here. But I will tell you this. I'm looking at articles today. Jordan, we started on this last week, kind of brought it out into the national attention, and it's picking up a lot of steam right now.
Yeah, and I think to a point, Ray is right. When you had this story first break, there's two things hit me right away when I was watching it the next morning on the news after he did it that afternoon at the political rally. I said, first of all, one, liberal media, folks like at MSNBC, they wouldn't be trying to defend this the next morning if they thought it was a recess appointment because that wouldn't be a constitutional controversy. So that kind of was surprising to me. And then second, though, they started putting up graphs saying, oh, look, President Bush made this many recess appointments. President Obama's only made this many recess appointments, so it's just a recess appointment. But again, it contradicted itself, but it's a confusing enough, complicated enough issue that they can spin it one way, and you have to really cut through the spin, understand now there would not be op-eds opposing each other in your local newspaper, in national publications, on cable news. There wouldn't be a discussion about it. Scholars wouldn't be weighing in if it was just a recess appointment. Ray, I do think you're right. If the media line is this is just another recess appointment, then that doesn't seem so controversial. But everybody should remember, the fact that they're even having to talk about it means they know deep down this is a problem and that this is unprecedented.
And I think the reality is that we know that's what is going on here. This is 90 years of history and 90 years of constitutional analysis, and 230 years of our Constitution being thrown out the window here. And that's the real challenge. By the way, if you go to the website at aclj.org, I did an interview on this that is up. I encourage you to go there. We've got information posted at aclj.org. So a lot of great information there. Or call us at 1-877-989-2255 to add your name to this petition. Again, 877-989-2255 or aclj.org. A complex but important constitutional crisis going on right now. Let's try to grab another call.
All right, right back to the phones we go. Let's go to Danny calling from California on line 3. Danny, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hi, Danny.
Thank you for being who you are for us for the past, 10, 15 years or more, for Jay Sekulow and your son, for standing up for us. And secondly, one thing you both know is absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. And he does not one president, no matter regardless of which side they're from, they don't have that kind of authority to do that, Chad.
Yeah, well, that's exactly – look, the position we're taking is no president has this authority, and what's happened here is this sets, Jordan, we've talked about this, an unbelievably horrible precedent for our country and for presidents to come if they think they can unilaterally do this. I mean, I believe in a unilateral executive. There's certain executive authority, but it has to be within the confines of the United States Constitution, which is clearly is not.
That's absolutely right. And I think that is the theme throughout this whole discussion is that you should have to be able to put partisan politics aside, that cable news is not going to do that. Hardcore left, hardcore right, very difficult to do that. But to understand that this was instituted by the left, now they're upset about it. President Obama is breaking the precedent. And again, if he's allowed to do it, so will the next president of the United States and the next president and the next president. And you may not like it so much then. Be careful what you wish for, even if you like a president or like a pick. I've heard so many people, Dad, say, well, in this situation, that's not how constitutional precedent changes. When it changes for everything.
Let me encourage you to visit us at aclj.org. Check the website out. We've got a lot of information posted on this and a whole host of other issues. We've got our briefs in the Obamacare litigation going in, briefs on the immigration case going into the Supreme Court, all of that happening simultaneously. By the way, we represent almost 1/3 of the United States Congress and 100,000 Americans, over 100,000 Americans, on our briefs to the Supreme Court of the United States. Jordan, let everybody know how they can participate, though, in getting President Obama's actions changed here.
877-989-2255. You call that number right now, 877-989-2255. And what you're saying is we're taking back our Constitution, protecting our Constitution. 877-989-2255. Don't make it partisan. Make it about the Constitution. 877-989-2255.
And I refuse to take no for an answer.
It's an unbelievable power grab. Ignoring Congress, President Obama has just made political appointments to key government posts, brushing aside the separation of powers and acting in a manner that can only be described as unconstitutional. Of course, the Constitution permits all presidents to make appointments when the Senate is in recess. But that's not the case here. There's been no recess, and yet President Obama has taken this unprecedented and disturbing action. Stand with the American Center for Law and Justice now. Tell President Obama he must retract these unconstitutional appointments and urge him to abide by the framework of our nation, the U.S. Constitution. Add your name to our petition right now. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online aclj.org.